What kind of revenge or hatred would drive someone to dig up a sultan's bones from his grave and burn them to ashes? Imagine a sultan who shook the world in his lifetime, only to have his grave set ablaze after his death. In one of the darkest chapters of Ottoman history, the bones of Yıldırım Bayezid were exhumed from his tomb and burned in a fit of vengeance. So why was a ruler's body reduced to ashes, and how did this horrific act end in a miracle?
In 1397, the balance of power in Anatolia was shaken by fierce battles fought around Akçay. The Ottomans were expanding rapidly, while the Karamanids stubbornly resisted. The same land became the scene of a heavy clash between two wills. Yıldırım Bayezid scattered the Karaman forces with the ruthless and destructive power of his army. This victory not only secured a battlefield, but also clearly shifted the claim to supremacy in Anatolia to his side. After the heavy defeat, Karamanoğlu Bey took refuge in Konya Castle. However, the castle failed to defend him that day. It was captured shortly thereafter, and he was executed on Bayezid's orders. This execution seemed like a major and decisive move for the Ottomans, but for the Karamanid dynasty, that moment marked the beginning of an unhealed wound and a long revenge. Young Mehmed Bey never forgot his father's death. He also never forgot the transition of his principality to Ottoman rule. The anger that grew that day remained unquenched for many years. What Bayezid gained was land. What remained within Mehmed Bey was deep anger. One expanded Anatolia, while the other carried within him a dark reckoning waiting silently for its time. The defeat at Akçay was not merely the end of a battle. What was buried in the ground that day was not peace, but a great and bitter reckoning that would unfold years later in Bursa.
How did a sultan fall? The defeat in Ankara Plain in 1402 suddenly reversed the fortunes of Yıldırım Bayezid. Defeated by Timur's great army, the sultan was unable to keep up with his own pace for the first time. The defeat was not only military. Bayezid was taken prisoner, his power weakened, his will wore thin. The heavy burden on the shoulders of a ruler could no longer be sustained by war alone. In 1403, in Akçay, the torment of captivity and the heavy decline of his body took Bayezid's life. The once mighty ruler died in exile, in profound silence. His body was temporarily buried in the tomb of Sheikh Mahmud Hayrani in Akçay. This was not a permanent resting place. It was merely a brief stop until the great storm passed. During the turbulent and dark days of the interregnum, Musa Çelebi brought his father's body to Bursa. Thus, after a long journey, Bayezid returned to the soil of his former capital. Emir Süleyman commissioned the architect Ali bin Hussein to build a magnificent tomb for Bayezid. The first Ottoman Hafiz permanently engraved the memory of his father in stone with this structure. Bayezid now lay in the Yıldırım Complex. However, no matter how solid the walls of the mausoleum appeared, the old peace that lay within was not yet truly and completely secure.
Why was the capital left defenseless? By 1413, the Ottoman Empire had been exhausted by the long struggle for the throne between brothers. The state was still standing, but the balance within it had been severely shaken at its core. Çelebi Mehmed was trying to eliminate his brothers and rebuild the state. At the same time, Karamanoğlu Mehmed Bey, who carried the burden of old wounds, was quietly and patiently waiting for the right moment. His hatred for his father was no longer just a desire for revenge. Mehmed Bey wanted to deal the final blow to the Ottomans and finally settle the old score that had been building up for so long. For this reason, he gathered a massive army and laid siege to the walls of Bursa. As he advanced toward the center of the weary state, his target was not only the city, but also the ancient memory of the dynasty. Bursa's strong inner castle did not fall due to the resistance of Haji Ivaz Pasha. The Karaman army stubbornly attacked the walls for days, but the stones of the castle did not give them a way through. Unable to enter, Mehmed Bey directed his anger towards the defenseless outer neighborhoods and dynastic complexes. His real target was the one name that had been stuck in his mind for years: Yıldırım Bayezid. The castle remained standing, but the siege continued. The victory Mehmed Bey desired was no longer within the walls, but only at the silent, cold, and stony threshold of a grave. Why was the tomb set on fire? The Karaman army suddenly stormed into the Yıldırım Complex, located on a high hill east of the city. Their anger was no longer directed at the city, but directly at the memory of a dead man. Early Ottoman records describe those moments with palpable fear. For what was happening here was not looting, but a deliberate and severe blow to the memory of a dynasty. On Mehmed Bey's orders, the doors of the tomb were smashed with heavy blows. The protected area was opened. The Sultan's sarcophagus inside was instantly shattered by the soldiers' ruthless and heavy hands. The delicate brass bars were broken and scattered. The tomb was dug up. The silence beneath the stone was broken, and the attackers quickly and directly reached Bayezid's body, then his bones. The bones of a Ghazi sultan were ruthlessly scattered on the marble floor of the tomb. The soldiers trampled these sacred remains underfoot. They did not even respect the honor of the dead. But Mehmed Bey did not stop there. He gathered the scattered bones, lit a huge fire in the middle of the tomb, and cruelly burned Bayezid's bones there in front of everyone. This was no longer just cruelty. The hand that set the tomb on fire also intended to destroy the legitimacy of the dynasty. But that fire raised not only ashes, but also unforgettable anger. Why did the army suddenly flee? As the bones burned, Mehmed Bey mistook his own rage for a great victory. But at that moment, a vast cloud of dust rising on the horizon of Bursa changed everything. A large caravan advancing under flags and banners began to appear in the distance. The Karaman soldiers, mistaking it for the main army of Çelebi Mehmed approaching, were seized with great fear. The superiority he had suddenly established was destroyed. The army, which had just been puffing up its pride at the grave, was now seized with fear and began to retreat in disarray, abandoning the siege. The retreat was not orderly. Supplies were abandoned, the army's formation broke down, and panic grew rapidly. The attack launched before Bursa quickly dissolved into a spirit of defeat on all sides. Mehmed Bey also succumbed to this great fear. The man who thought he had avenged his father immediately fled from there without looking back, fearing the approaching retaliation. But the real truth was heavier than the visible scene. What was advancing in that cloud of dust was not an armed army, but a silent funeral procession carrying the body of Musa Çelebi. The army that burned the bones of one dead man had missed the silent return of another. History sometimes delivers its harshest judgment with a quiet but flawless and cold irony.
Today, the silent tomb standing in the Yıldırım Complex managed to survive the great earthquake of 1855. There stands not just a grave, but an unshaken dynastic memory.